We have to talk about skill-based matchmaking in Modern Warfare 3. Because this is the first time in a while where I've been in such a controlled, extreme environment in any kind of matchmaker that I feel it's worth talking about. Because Call of Duty is going to new lengths and new extremes to make sure that the game plays a certain way for certain people, and make sure that the game protects some of its lower ranked players. But the methods that they're using to try and achieve this, I think, are becoming really controversial in a way that actually doesn't help the players that they're looking to help, and ends up actually making everybody's experience somewhat miserable. Now, for those of you who don't know, SBMM is skill-based matchmaking, a system that matches players of a certain caliber of skill to similar players within that same caliber of skill. The idea creating a balanced game that people will have a competitive time with, and allowing players who are of lower skills in particular to feel protected within a bracket that doesn't make them play against some of the world's best. And in principle, that is a really good idea. The last thing you want when you're onboarding players into a new game, or you're trying to get players to kind of feel grounded and used to mechanics in a game, is to make them get bombarded and ran over by some of the world's best players. But the problem with these methods lie in the execution, and that's especially true with Call of Duty. Because Call of Duty doesn't just use skill-based matchmaking, it also uses engagement-based matchmaking. And engagement-based matchmaking is a mechanism to try and get you to play the game for as long as humanly possible. And you can notice this a lot in Call of Duty when your first game of the day always tends to be your easiest. Because if you pick up lots of kills and wins in your first game, Call of Duty is convinced that you will carry on playing. And if you end up picking up lots of different losses, eventually they'll throw in a sort of freebie to make you carry on playing even more, hoping that you won't quit the game because you're steadily being carroted on a stick through the matchmaking system. So what is the problem with how Call of Duty handles skill-based matchmaking? Because theoretically, whether it's SBMM or engagement-based matchmaking, the outcome should be that players have a fairly decent time, regardless of their skill caliber. But the reality for Call of Duty seems very different. In Call of Duty's case, the SBMM seems to be so extreme, so tight and based around engagement as well, that almost everybody, regardless of your skill bracket, is having a fairly rough time. Because everybody is constantly being placed in lobbies where they have to be using meta weapons, they have to be doing their equivalent of tryharding, and they have to perform to their utmost best. So whether you're somebody who's fairly fresh to the game, or somebody who doesn't play the game extensively and isn't very skilled, or somebody who is of a world-class caliber, the experience almost feels the same in a way, because the scaling remains the same. Whether you're really good or fairly mediocre at the game, you're always going to be playing against people of a similar caliber to you. Meaning that even though somebody who is of a world-class caliber feels like all of their games are sweaty, chances are lots of you guys who play just semi-casually also feel like your games are extremely sweaty all the time. And this is something I've heard a lot from my audience, a lot from my friends who tend to play casually, that this system just seems to make the game miserable for them. Because there's no variance in the caliber of player, meaning that you're always up against players who are always switched on, and you in turn always have to switch on. There's no leaning back in your chair, there's no listening to some music, there's no playing casually with weapons which are a little bit off meta. If you aren't performing at your utmost caliber, you are going to be chewed out by this skill-based and engagement-based system. Other games like X-Defiant are not including any skill-based matchmaking in any of their unranked modes, meaning that everything you play outside of ranked is entirely random. And games in the past have had other systems for this as well. For example, in H1Z1, if you were a low-ranked player and you happened to kill a higher-ranked player, it gave you substantially more experience for doing so, because the game rewarded you for doing something that was quite rare to do. But SBMM is without a doubt the most talked about thing in Call of Duty, because Call of Duty, by every stretch of the imagination, has the strictest system I think I've ever seen in any given game. There is very little variance, there is very little randomness, and you are almost always playing against people who are always going to be doing their utmost to win the game. And this is what I've heard from experiences from myself, other YouTubers, but more importantly, the wider community of players. You guys at home who play at home casually, people in my audience who just kick up their feet once every weekend and give it a go, the feeling seems to be universal. Now, for this next part of the video, I'm going to be talking about exclusively my issue with SBMM, and I understand that this is a very niche thing, because I am fairly talented at Call of Duty, and that isn't me stroking my own ego, and I am aware that SBMM exists so that players like me don't get to just roll over bot lobbies, and I fully understand that, because SBMM in principle is a really good system for protecting players who are fresh to the game. But my personal issue with skill-based matchmaking in Call of Duty or engagement-based matchmaking is that the entire game seems to be pinned on me. If I stop performing in any one of these games, I am confident the teams that I am going to play with will always get rolled every single time. Now, I don't necessarily mind skill-based matchmaking, so long as the people that I am matched with in my team are also of a similar caliber to me. Because at the moment, it feels as though I'm one very good player with 3 or 4 average to okay players being match-made against 3 or 4 very decent players. Hypothetically, if we gave all of those players a skill rating of 1 to 5, I'm a 5, my teammates are like a 2, or maybe there's 1 3 in the mix, but the enemy team is all 4s. And the problem with that means that I kind of end up in a scenario where if I take my foot off the pedal and I relax, it is a miserable experience for not only me, but everybody else on my team as well. It's almost as though SBMM is hedging on me being an outlier to drag up the statistical average of the lobby. And that's not how SBMM should work. If skill-based matchmaking or engagement-based matchmaking is truly skill-based or truly engagement-based, then if I had some decent teammates, I would feel more inclined to stay on. It's why people enjoy ranked-based game modes in multiplayer, because they are matched with people of similar skills to them, and they expect certain calibers of gameplay from those players. I've recently played a lot of Valorant recently, and even in the silver lobbies and lower tier lobbies, there is an expectation that players play to a certain standard. And that standard being universal ultimately makes the experience more engaging, more challenging, and more fun for everybody involved. In the Call of Duty system, it seems to be a case of, right, good luck, we're going to throw you lamb to the slaughter, and if you don't end up playing really well, then maybe in 2 or 3 games we might throw you a 3B. Now, the gameplay you're seeing in the background today is actually from the experimental playlist, which has basically little to no SBMM, which is why I'm somewhat frying out and having a decent time. And this is the only way at the moment, other than manipulating the game with a VPN or geofencing, that I can play the game and somewhat relax without having to sweat like crazy. Because it's genuinely gotten to a point for me that if I play regular 6v6 multiplayer on the non-experimental playlists, it is so intense and sweaty that unless I've done, 17 monsters, 16 shots of G Fuel and an Adderall, it's pretty much impossible to keep up with the lobby. And I think therein lies the fault for Call of Duty and its engagement-based systems and skill-based systems. It will always assume that you are 100% capacity all of the time. There is no leniency or variance, and it will simply always assume that you are always playing your best, and if you're not, and you decide to chill for a game or try an off-meta weapon, you're punished for doing so. And I'm going to say it again for the end of this video because I do think it's worth mentioning. I'm fully behind skill-based systems. I understand why they exist, and I think it is good for new players, and I think it is good to protect certain players as they work their way through mechanics. But to this degree, in unranked public playlists, to a level of control that I honestly feel makes the game fairly miserable, not only for a player like me, but for a good amount of people, I think is crazy if I'm being honest. It feels as though I'm almost being punished for playing the game at some times. And I understand in some essences this video will come across as me stroking my own ego and being like, wow guys, look how much of a good COD player I am, and also look how much I should cry about me having to play other good COD players. But I don't really think about it like that. I'm just trying to relax and play the game sometimes like you guys are. To the extent where sometimes if I'm not streaming, I don't even play the game anymore because I know that unless I'm awake and I'm alert and I've had some coffees and I'm switched on, I'm not going to be able to play casually because I'm in such a tier and bracket now that that just isn't an option for me. And because these systems are so scalable, chances are the same goes for a lot of you guys at home. Even if you aren't somebody who plays as extensively as me, there is a very high chance that you feel the same way. That unless you're 100% dialed in, headset on, EQ done, fully set up for the game ahead, then you won't end up having a decent experience. I'm interested to really hear your thoughts and feelings on this down below in the comment section because obviously the wider I have in terms of a pool of comments about experiences with SBMM, the more I can actually understand these systems from a wider background of players. So let me know what your thoughts and feelings are in the comment section below. And as always, folks, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.